Emma Carter, a 23-year-old aspiring chef, had always been known for her creativity and passion in the kitchen. She worked as an assistant at a cozy, tucked-away bistro in downtown Portland, a place that seemed to echo the charm of her culinary aspirations. With auburn hair always tied in a loose bun and a smudge of flour often adorning her cheek, Emma was the picture of dedication. Her notebook, brimming with recipes, ideas, and sketches of dream dishes, was her constant companion. She had a gift for turning ordinary ingredients into extraordinary creations, a talent that had earned her quiet admiration from the bistro's patrons. Yet beneath her warm smile and sparkling eyes lay a cautious heart. 2 years ago, Emma had been engaged to her high school sweetheart, someone she thought she would spend the rest of her life with. But when that relationship ended abruptly, leaving her with a shattered engagement ring and a trail of broken trust, Emma vowed to never let herself be vulnerable again. The pain of that betrayal had been her wake-up call. Since then she had buried herself in her culinary dreams, pouring her energy into every dish she prepared and steering clear of emotional entanglements. Love, she had convinced herself, was a distraction she couldn't afford. On the other side of town was Adrian Walker, a 25-year-old architect who saw the world not just in lines and angles but in emotions and stories. His love for sketching cityscapes was more than just a hobby. It was his way of capturing the beauty and complexity of life. Adrian was charismatic and driven, a natural leader in his field. Yet behind his confident demeanor was a young man carrying the weight of responsibility. His family, proud and ambitious, had high expectations of him and he worked tirelessly to meet them. But it was his younger sister, Molly, who meant the most to him. Diagnosed with a chronic illness, Molly required constant care and emotional support, and Adrian had taken it upon himself to be her rock. Balancing his demanding career and his responsibilities at home left little room for anything else, least of all romance. Their worlds couldn't have been more different, but as fate would have it, they collided one rainy afternoon. The streets of Portland were slick with water, and the gray clouds overhead seemed unrelenting. Adrian, seeking shelter from the sudden downpour, stumbled into the bistro where Emma worked. The cozy atmosphere, with its soft lighting and the aroma of freshly baked bread, was a stark contrast to the storm raging outside. His soaked clothes and slightly disheveled appearance made him stand out amidst the bistro's usual crowd. Emma, busy experimenting with a new dish in the open kitchen, noticed him immediately. There was something about the way he quietly set up his sketchpad, sipping his coffee as if trying to blend into the background, that caught her attention. Adrian, on the other hand, couldn't help but be intrigued by Emma's focus and creativity. Watching her work with precision, her hands deftly chopping and stirring, he saw a kind of artistry that resonated with his own. Their first interaction was unplanned but unforgettable. When Adrian's coffee cup tipped over, spilling onto his intricate sketches, Emma instinctively rushed to help. Their brief exchange, though filled with awkward smiles and light-hearted jokes, left an impression on both of them. For Emma, Adrian's easy humor was disarming. For Adrian, Emma's quiet empathy and quick thinking were captivating. That rainy afternoon marked the beginning of a connection neither of them had expected. A connection that would soon challenge their guarded hearts and open doors to a love they never thought they'd find. The bistro was unusually quiet that afternoon, the kind of peaceful lull that made the hum of the coffee grinder and the soft clatter of utensils seem louder than usual. Emma was in her element, her hands moving deftly as she worked on a new recipe. A delicate, savory tart she hoped would earn a spot on the bistro's seasonal menu. She was completely immersed, her focus unwavering, until the sound of the bell above the door chimed, announcing the arrival of a new customer. Emma glanced up briefly, just in time to see Adrian step in, rain dripping from his jacket and pooling on the floor beneath him. He looked slightly flustered, his dark hair damp and his shoes squeaking against the tiled floor as he made his way to an empty table near the open kitchen. He was handsome, no doubt about it, but it was his presence that caught her attention. A mix of confidence and subtle vulnerability as he adjusted his jacket and took a seat. Adrian felt out of place the moment he stepped into the cozy bistro. The warmth of the space, with its rustic decor and inviting atmosphere, was a stark contrast to the cold rain outside. He had only come in to escape the downpour, but as he sat down and looked around, he realized he was in no rush to leave. The smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee beans was comforting, and the quiet buzz of activity in the kitchen was oddly soothing. He ordered a coffee and a croissant, then pulled out his sketchpad, a familiar escape when the world outside felt overwhelming. His pencil moved across the page, capturing the rain-soaked street visible through the bistro's large front window. But as he sketched, his gaze kept drifting to the open kitchen. Emma was busy plating a dish, her movements precise yet graceful. There was something captivating about her focus, the way she seemed to pour her heart into every detail. She didn't notice him watching, but Adrian found himself fascinated by her quiet determination. It reminded him of the way he felt when he designed a building, the satisfaction of creating something meaningful out of nothing. Their first real interaction happened almost by accident. Adrian reached for his coffee, his attention still on his sketchpad, and in one clumsy moment the cup tipped over, spilling its contents across the table and onto his drawing. He let out a frustrated sigh, quickly grabbing a napkin to mop up the mess. Emma, hearing the commotion, looked up and saw the scene unfolding. Without a second thought, she wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. "Oh no. Let me grab some napkins," she said, her voice warm with concern as she hurried to help. Adrian looked up, surprised by her swift response. "Thanks," he said with a sheepish smile. "I think my coffee just decided it didn't like my drawing." Emma chuckled softly, handing him a handful of napkins. "Maybe it's a sign to start fresh?" she offered, her eyes briefly scanning the smudged lines on his sketchpad. "Maybe," Adrian replied, a small grin forming on his face. "Or maybe I'm just terrible at balancing cups." Her lips curved into a small smile. "Well, for what it's worth, your drawing looks pretty impressive, even with the coffee stains." Their conversation was brief, but it carried an unexpected warmth. Adrian found himself lingering on her words long after she returned to the kitchen, her attention back on her culinary experiments. For Emma, the encounter left her curious about the man who seemed so at ease despite the mishap. In the following days, Adrian found himself returning to the bistro more often than he cared to admit. Sometimes it was to escape the noise of the city, but more often, it was because he couldn't shake the image of Emma's smile or the sound of her voice. Emma noticed his visits but didn't comment. Instead, she found herself looking forward to the moments when their paths crossed. She admired his sketches from a distance, occasionally sneaking glances at the intricate cityscapes he brought to life with his pencil. Each interaction between them, though small, carried a growing sense of familiarity and ease. It wasn't long before their conversations became more frequent. Adrian would compliment her cooking, often joking that he was secretly trying to steal her recipes, and Emma would tease him about his habit of occupying the same corner table with his sketchpad. Slowly but surely, their connection began to deepen, and what started as a chance encounter on a rainy afternoon began to feel like the beginning of something much more. The bistro was bustling that day, a stark contrast to the quiet serenity of their first meeting. The usual hum of conversation was louder, the clinking of glasses and the faint hiss of the espresso machine filling the air. Emma moved swiftly through the kitchen, juggling multiple tasks at once. She barely had a moment to catch her breath, and her mind was already buzzing with thoughts of the upcoming dinner service. Adrian arrived a little later than usual, his sketchpad tucked under one arm and a gift bag in his hand. He had spent the morning visiting an art supply store, picking out a set of pencils he thought Emma might like. Over the past few weeks, their conversations had touched on their mutual love of creativity, hers through food, his through architecture and art. He had noticed how her eyes lit up whenever he mentioned his sketches, and he thought this small gesture might show her how much he appreciated her interest. Emma was in the middle of plating a dish when she spotted Adrian walking in. She offered him a quick smile, her hands too busy to wave. He nodded back, his usual seat near the kitchen already occupied by an older couple sipping tea. Instead, Adrian chose a spot closer to the window, a table tucked away in the corner. He placed the gift bag on the table and pulled out his sketchpad, flipping through pages of unfinished drawings. He was working up the courage to give her the pencils, rehearsing what he might say in his head. But as he sat there, he noticed something unusual. A man had entered the bistro and approached Emma at the counter. He was tall, with sharp features and an air of familiarity about him. Adrian watched as Emma's face broke into a wide smile, her eyes lighting up in a way he hadn't seen before. She leaned forward, listening intently as the man spoke, her laughter ringing out over the din of the kitchen. Adrian's chest tightened. He couldn't hear their conversation over the noise, but the ease between them was unmistakable. The man reached across the counter, his hand brushing against Emma's as he handed her something. A small, carefully wrapped package. Emma blushed slightly, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as she accepted it. Adrian tried to look away, focusing on his sketchpad, but his pencil refused to move. The image of Emma smiling so openly at someone else was now etched in his mind. The gift bag on his table suddenly felt like a foolish idea, a desperate attempt to bridge a gap he wasn't sure even existed. In the kitchen, Emma was oblivious to Adrian's presence. The man standing before her was Mark, a friend and former colleague who had stopped by unexpectedly. He had brought her a small bag of specialty spices from a trip abroad, knowing how much she loved experimenting with new flavors. Their conversation was friendly and brief, but Emma's laughter carried a warmth that made it seem like an entirely different story to Adrian. Adrian sat in silence, his thoughts spiraling. Was he misreading their connection? Had he imagined the sparks between them? The memory of their shared moments, the easy conversations, the way her smile lingered just a little longer when she looked at him, suddenly felt fragile, as though they could shatter under the weight of his doubt. Emma finally noticed Adrian sitting by the window, her face lighting up as she wiped her hands on her apron and made her way over. She greeted him with her usual warmth, but Adrian's response was noticeably subdued. He forced a smile, his voice steady but lacking its usual energy. "Busy day?" he asked, glancing toward the counter where Mark had been standing moments ago. Emma nodded, oblivious to the shift in his tone. "Always is around this time. But it's nice. Keeps things exciting." Adrian hesitated, his eyes flickering to the gift bag on the table. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words didn't come. Instead, he offered a non-committal nod and began packing up his sketchpad. Emma frowned slightly, sensing something was off. "Leaving so soon?" "Yeah, just remembered I have some errands to run," Adrian replied, his tone light but distant. "I'll see you around." Emma watched as he walked out, the bell above the door chiming softly in his wake. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, but with the bistro demanding her attention, she had no time to dwell on it. Adrian stepped out into the rain, his sketchpad tucked under his arm and the gift bag still clutched in his hand. The warmth of the bistro felt like a distant memory, replaced by the chill of doubt creeping into his chest. For the first time since he had met Emma, he wasn't sure where they stood, and the uncertainty was far more unsettling than he expected. Adrian spent the evening replaying the scene at the bistro in his mind. Every detail felt magnified. The way Emma had smiled at the other man, the package exchange, her laughter. It gnawed at him, feeding his insecurities. He had always prided himself on being level-headed, but this time his emotions had taken the reins. After a restless night, Adrian made a decision. He wasn't one to let misunderstandings fester. The next morning he returned to the bistro, gift bag in hand. The thought of confronting Emma made his chest tighten, but he knew it was necessary. He needed clarity, even if it meant risking the connection they had built. Emma greeted him with her usual warmth, her eyes lighting up as she saw him approach. "Back so soon?" she asked, her tone teasing. Adrian managed a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I wanted to drop this off," he said, sliding the gift bag across the counter. "It's something I thought you might like." Emma's brows lifted in surprise. She opened the bag carefully, her expression softening as she pulled out the set of art pencils. "Adrian, these are beautiful," she said, her voice touched with genuine appreciation. "Thank you." Adrian hesitated before speaking. "About yesterday. I saw you talking to someone. He seemed important to you." Emma's smile faltered for a moment before understanding dawned. "You mean Mark?" she asked. "He's an old friend. We used to work together before I started here. He dropped by to give me some spices from his trip. That's all." Adrian's shoulders relaxed, a weight lifting from his chest. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "I shouldn't have jumped to conclusions. I guess I just didn't want to lose what we've been building." Emma reached across the counter, her hand brushing his. "You won't," she said firmly. "But next time just talk to me, okay? I'm not going anywhere." Their eyes met, and for the first time in days, Adrian felt a sense of peace. The gap between them had been bridged, and with it came a renewed sense of connection. With the misunderstanding behind them, Adrian and Emma's bond deepened. They began spending more time together outside the bistro, exploring the city and sharing parts of their lives they had kept private. Adrian took Emma to his favorite spots: a quiet bookstore tucked away in an alley, a park with a stunning view of the skyline, and an art gallery where he revealed a few of his works on display. Emma, in turn, invited Adrian into her world. She showed him her culinary experiments, letting him taste test dishes she was perfecting for the bistro. They spent evenings in her cozy apartment, her kitchen filled with the aroma of spices and laughter echoing through the space. Adrian marveled at how effortlessly she turned simple ingredients into works of art, her passion shining through in every bite. One evening, as they sat on her balcony overlooking the city lights, Emma turned to Adrian with a contemplative expression. "You know," she said, "I've always believed that food has a way of bringing people together. But I never realized how much it could mean until I met you." Adrian smiled, his hand brushing hers. "And I never thought someone could inspire me the way you have. You've made me see things differently, in the best way possible." Their connection was undeniable, and with each passing day they grew closer. But as their relationship blossomed, Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that Emma was holding something back. There was a part of her he hadn't yet uncovered, a secret that lingered just out of reach. It happened on a quiet evening, the kind that had become their norm. They were at Emma's apartment, the remnants of a shared dinner scattered across the table. Adrian was sketching idly in his pad while Emma washed the dishes, humming softly to herself. As Adrian flipped through his sketches, he came across a drawing he had started but never finished. A portrait of Emma, her expression serene and her hair falling softly around her face. He hesitated, then decided to show it to her. "Hey Emma," he called, holding up the sketch. "What do you think?" Emma dried her hands and walked over, her eyes widening as she saw the drawing. For a moment she didn't speak, her gaze fixed on the paper. Then, to Adrian's surprise, her expression shifted, a mix of awe and something deeper, almost like sadness. "It's beautiful," she said softly, but her voice was tinged with emotion. Adrian noticed the change immediately. "Emma, what is it?" he asked, setting the sketchpad aside. "You can tell me." Emma hesitated, her fingers twisting the dish towel in her hands. Finally, she took a deep breath. "There's something I haven't told you," she admitted. "Before I moved here, I was engaged." Adrian's heart skipped a beat. "Engaged?" She nodded, her eyes downcast. "His name was Daniel. We were together for years, but it didn't work out. He wanted a life I couldn't give him. Moving here was my way of starting over, of finding myself again." The room fell silent, the weight of her confession hanging in the air. Adrian reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "Emma, thank you for telling me. I'm not here to replace your past, but I'd like to be a part of your future. If you'll let me." Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "I'd like that too," she whispered. From that moment on, Adrian and Emma's relationship took on a new depth. Emma's honesty about her past brought them closer, and Adrian's support gave her the strength to fully embrace their future. They learned to navigate the complexities of their lives together, their bond growing stronger with each challenge. Adrian encouraged Emma to take risks with her cooking, pushing her to experiment with bold flavors and new techniques. In return, Emma inspired Adrian to showcase his art more confidently, even helping him organize a small exhibition at the bistro. The event was a success, with guests marveling at Adrian's sketches and enjoying Emma's culinary creations. As the evening drew to a close, Adrian and Emma stood side by side, their hands intertwined. For the first time they felt like they were exactly where they were meant to be. Months later, the bistro was thriving, thanks in part to the unique events Emma and Adrian had introduced. Their partnership had become a seamless blend of creativity and passion, each complementing the other in ways neither had expected. One evening, as they walked home under a canopy of stars, Adrian paused. He turned to Emma, his expression serious but filled with warmth. "Emma, I know we've had our share of ups and downs, but there's no one else I'd rather face them with. You've changed my life in ways I can't even begin to explain." Emma smiled, her heart full. "And you've changed mine. I didn't think I'd find someone who understands me the way you do." Adrian took her hand, his thumb brushing against her knuckles. "Then let's keep changing each other's lives, together." Emma nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. In that moment, the past felt like a distant memory, the future a canvas waiting to be filled. Together they walked on, their journey just beginning.